Welcome to Week 13 of Waiver Plug. I'm your host, Mike, here to give you the best fantasy news and advice going into the playoffs and who you need to add to help bolster your team and make yourself a championship winner. Now, it's very important to know that a lot of teams slowly and surely know they're going to make it into the playoffs and will put the brakes on some of their players. And others will need to make their players play a little bit extra and go a little bit harder to get into the playoffs. So my whole waiver ads this week are teams that aren't great, but they need to perform to make it into the playoffs. So pay attention. These are the key ads, and we would love to see if you make it into the championship. Add these players. Starting off, this is a QB who just beat the Ravens, and that is Trevor Lawrence, who marched his team in the fourth quarter and got a touchdown, which is, in my opinion, very questionable of a touchdown. Going against the Ravens and getting them to win. He is currently ranked 10th at QB, and I'm not saying I'm shocked because he had all the potential in the world, but he still doesn't have that great of offense around him. He still only has one wide receiver as Kirk, but there's another one performing quite as well, if not better, on that team as well. But let's talk about what Trevor Lawrence is right now. 57% owned around the league. Yes, it's kind of high, but you're going to want to have him going into the playoffs. Last week, he threw for 321 yards, passing yards, 3 touchdowns. And he's going to go against the Detroit Lions this week coming up. And in the championship weekend, you're going to have him going against the Houston Texans. And he's a must-own. He will need to perform to get his team possibly into the playoffs. So add him up. Next up, it's a little bit of a risky pick, but if you have a QB that is not currently top 10, I think this is a key ad, and his name is Mike White. Why are we adding Mike White? Well, he's 8% owned, and there's a lot of QBs out there that are not really worth picking up, but he's one of them, and he's definitely on the waiver wire unless you're 1 week ahead and you took a huge risk. And why are we adding him? He had 315 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, almost similar to Trevor Lawrence, but he did it against the Bears, and it's not as good as the Ravens, but the Bears aren't that good at defense. And the good part is that the Jets have a very, very favorable matchups going into the playoffs. He has going against Detroit in Week 15, and Week 16 he's going against the Jags. So it could be a show-off between Mike White and Trevor Lawrence, and I think you need to add him because he has a really good team around him. He has offensive playmakers around him, and he has a great defense that is backing him. So he'll have good field position and the time of the clock all around. So add him up. Next up, I'm going to go with a running back on the Jets as well. How do I pronounce his name? Zonovan Knight. If I'm butchering that, sorry. He's 0% owned. And the reason why we're going to add him is because they're run-first offense, and Michael Carter got hurt. James Robinson did not get activated, and some people think it's just because the Jets will have to pay up a higher draft pick if he does get over the rushing total on his deal with the Jags. So I think Knight is the one to own. Ty Johnson, he didn't have as many carries as Knight, and I think Knight's just more explosive. He makes more plays out of the backfield and in the passing downs. He had 14 carries last week for 69 yards and 3 catches for 34 yards. And yes, Michael Carter played for about the first half, so I would say that there's a lot of potential of him seeing more carries going forward. And he has nothing to play for. He's an undrafted rookie out of NC State, and you would love to see him make a move. So, like I said, favorable matchups going for the Jets, going against the Detroit, and I think Houston, and both those teams give huge running numbers. Must add, especially if Michael Carter is hurt for longer distance of time. As previously mentioned, we're going to recycle teams that need to play and win going late into the season. So this next wide receiver is from the Jags, just like T-Law, Zay Jones. And yes, it's not Kirk. 38% owned around the league. Saw 24 targets in the last two games, 19 catches for the last 2 games, and 213 yards in the last 2 games. And yes, last 2 games. But those are impressive numbers regardless of who it is. And we love the total amount of targets for any wide receiver to be almost averaging 10 plus in each game. Targets equals production. So why are we adding him? Easy schedule, team that needs to perform to get into the playoffs if they do, and a QB that is performing above his level of what we thought he would be. But he has the talent. He was the first overall pick for the Jags, and they need him to show up. Big things coming for the Jags. They might make a playoff push, and you might make a playoff push if you have Zay Jones on your roster, on your bench, ready for those games going forward. Honorably mentioned, this list is getting smaller and smaller and less important. But these players, I think you should watch or add them onto your team, especially the second person I'm going to add. Well, it's not person, it's a team. But Van Jefferson, he's currently the only wide receiver on the Rams worth owning, and currently the only one that's really on the team. Right now, the backup QB Perkins is the starter right now. The Stafford being hurt. And we don't know exactly when Stafford will be back. And Van Jefferson needs to start balling because I think he wants to eventually get paid. So what do? We add him onto the roster because he needs the ball. He's coming off of an injury a couple weeks ago. He's finally back. And Robinson, he's out for the remainder of the season. So the only targets left is going to be to Van Jefferson and to probably Higbee. So add him onto your roster. And next up, like I've been said, this team was already on my waiver wire a couple weeks ago. I had the Jets defense already been a top 10 defensive team in the whole year. But right now it's only 43% owned, and I guess it's just because you think it's the Jets and you're scared to play them. But I played them last week. You got to keep playing them. They have favorable matchups going forward, and it's going to help you win playoff games. So add them up. That wraps it up, folks, for Week 13. These videos are going to be more specific for people that are in the playoffs, so pay attention. You need to make sure you have teams that aren't, guaranteed lots for the playoffs. Teams like the Eagles and so forth, because players are going to start shutting down. We're not there yet, but pay attention. If you're getting close to and we're in the championship, you have to make sure that you have either the backup or somebody else that is going to fill the shoes for these players, because going forward, you see it every year. You do not want to be one of those players that have to be filling people from the waiver wire and be shut out. But I would like to thank everyone and all of you for all the views and likes and subscribes. We last just got 1.1K in our last waiver wire video, and I would like to thank you. Please continue to show the love. Make sure you let me know you got into the championship. Comment below.